The Alekhine-Chatard Attack starts in the classical French defense. We pin their knight to their queen. People play 4 moves here. I would consider h6 an inaccuracy if not a mistake. Bishop b4 is the McCutcheon. D takes e4 is the burn variation. I'll have separate videos on these. As you'll see at the master level, the most common by far is the burn variation, but at the club level, the majority of players are playing bishop e7. After all, they're worried about losing their knight. The move here is e5, kicking their knight back. And if you remember from the last video, a goal of ours in the French is to trade off our dark bishop for their dark bishop. So it makes sense that the main line here is capturing, but you may also remember that our goal in the French is to attack on the king side as quickly as possible. And if we look at our opponent's setup, it's about as passive as it can get. So I think that takes priority, and I think the best move here is h4, the Alekhine-Chatard Attack. Staying true to the name of my channel, this opening is also a Gambit system. After all, if they capture and we recapture, they can take back with their queen on g5. The first thing I'd like to point out here is that most people actually don't accept the Gambit, only 34% of players. At the master level, that's only 27%, and we'll find out why in a minute. But first, I'd like to quickly go through what happens if they decline. First of all, h6. We're going to capture. We've achieved our goal of trading off the dark bishop. And the only difference between the position before when we were going to trade, and we played h4 instead, and now, is we have a pawn on h4. Our opponent has a pawn on h6, which can serve as a lever later. I would consider this a better version of the same position. We're going to play f4, opening up the square for our knight, and we're going to attack on the king side. Now a6, why would they play a6? If you remember in my last video, there's a very common theme here. After they play c5, we always want to be on the lookout for knight b5. This is a theme that's going to come up a lot in this gambit, in a ton of different lines, more than I can go over in a video. And it's here that we play another very thematic French defense move as white. We play queen g4, reinforcing this bishop, and interestingly, a lot of people will capture here, and if they do capture, the resulting position is very similar to the Alekhine-Chatard Attack. We have the open rook on the h-file, but we just haven't sacrificed a pawn, so it's a lot better. But most people know better. In my opinion, the best try is h5. I've seen this, and so will you. Our plan here is very simple. We're going to fall back to g3, a very comfortable square for our queen. After all, we're still x-raying their g-pawn. We're still defending our bishop, and the engine is already suggesting king moves. Here is a good time for them to capture, but considering that very much goes against the nature of a French defense player, voluntarily trading off the dark bishop, usually instead they'll play g6. And if you're not smelling blood in the water here, you should probably get your nose checked. We have the makings of a very exciting opposite side castling game. We're going to pawn storm the king side, and there are a ton of pawn levers for us to attack and dark squared weaknesses to abuse with our knight. But first, I think it is a good idea to trade off the dark bishop while we still can, and then we can start our attack. We've covered h6, we've covered a6. The next is the very foolish early c5. I say it's foolish because we're going to start off by trading off the bishop. The engine takes with king, so you know things are about to get good. And from here we have the very thematic knight jump to b5 that I was discussing earlier and in the intro video. You'll see this in a ton of different lines, but it is important to remember to capture first. That way we can move the queen and get ready to jump in with our knight. And the final thing I would like to cover is why they can't play f6. After all, if you don't calculate it out, it seems like a pretty reasonable move here. That reason is after f6, we can deliver queen h5 check, and after g6, get ready for this, e takes f6. That's right, they can't play f6 because we can trap their queen. Bet you weren't expecting that. Like I said, it's not so obvious, so I definitely wanted to go over it. So the Gambit hasn't even been accepted yet, and there's already plenty of violence. Let's see what happens when they do accept the Gambit. We'll of course recapture, and 97% of players will capture the pawn back. Really the only reasonable move. And here there are 3 good moves. There is knight h3, queen d3, and knight b5. And I've spent way more time than I would be willing to admit studying these 3 variations to see which is the best practically speaking. My determination with knight to h3 was that it's a good option, but the lines feel very engine-y and it's not very intuitive to convert, so we'll rule that out. Knight b5 is very exciting because almost no club level players even know about it. It generally forces your opponent to forego castling rights. If we look at the Masters database, it's very rare here as well, with only 3% of games played. So in terms of a surprise weapon, in terms of catching your opponent off guard, if that's your goal in playing the Alekhine-Chatard Attack, I would really look into this line. I've definitely pulled it out in Blitz if someone very clearly knows what theory they're in, but for the purposes of this guide, I'll be recommending what I consider to be the best move, practically speaking, queen d3 in the style of a Paulson attack. Goal behind this move is obviously we're threatening this pawn and also getting ready to eventually castle long. And there are 3 good moves in a sea of blunders and mistakes here. The first one is the most natural move in my opinion, h6, and it's in this position that I like knight h3. They'll usually go back to e7, but I'll quickly cover g6 because you'll see this a lot, and we'll cover a similar line towards the beginning, where they scooch their queen back to g6 hoping to trade with yours. Now taking here isn't horrible, it does ruin their pawn structure, and it's not a bad endgame if you're a strong endgame player and that's sort of your style of play, you like trading things down. But if you're subscribed to this channel, that's probably not you, and it's not me either. Our move whenever they try to trade is always going to be queen d2. It's a very comfortable square, they don't have a dark bishop anymore, and it supports our f4 push, but most people won't play that here. Most people will instead play queen e7, by far the most common line. And here, to be honest, we can sort of play anything. Our position is that much better in my opinion. I mean, we've basically finished development. Our opponent doesn't have any pieces past the 7th rank. But the move I've always played here first is queen g3, targeting this pawn, because I like forcing them into creating this weakness with g6. But like I said, it's really dealer's choice. We're going to castle long, and we're going to play for mate. Now that I think about it too, my reasoning for this is actually a pretty important concept. The reason I like starting with queen g3 is I don't really have a strong preference in terms of the move I want to play, but queen g3 is just the hardest of the few to remember, so might as well put it first if I'm going to memorize it. So that's what we do if they defend by playing h6. Next, as we just looked at, if they go straight back to g6, we'll want to drop our queen back to d2, and prepare to castle long, playing for the same plans as before, but now we can play our bishop to d3 with tempo. So in my opinion, not a great move from our opponent, but it is pretty common. After all, people are up a pawn, we played a gambit, and they want queens off the board. In the same vein, the next time you want queens off the board and want to offer a queen trade, make sure you calculate what happens if they decline the queen trade. This is sort of a very famous way that beginners tend to blunder. Next, we'll cover g6. Here, the move is once again knight h3, not wanting to block our f-pawn in. Trying to pin our knight, of course, is pretty silly because we're about to castle, so the only good move here really is queen e7. From here, I like castling and getting ready for our pawn storm. We'll attack on the king side. We won't forget to play king b1, and we have once again turned a boring French defense into a very interesting double-edged game, where we have a massive lead in development and space. So now we've covered h6, g6, queen g6. It's time to cover a very common blunder, the early c5. By now you should be familiar with the tactical theme, knight to b5. The most common try is knight to a6, but it's better to move your king in. We're going to take away their castling rights, and after they move their king, we're going to over-defend this pawn with knight f3. After all, it would be a shame to make it this far and then end up hanging this knight. Let's move on. Hopefully at this point you're starting to get a feel for the lines. I find the patterns to be very intuitive and easy to play. And next is going to be this move a6. They play this because they're terrified, of course, of knight b5. But as we mentioned at the beginning, first of all, they're hanging their h7 pawn. But better than capturing it immediately is starting with knight f3, f3 because we don't want to block our rook, of course, not to reinforce our pawn on e5 like the other variation. Like always, they'll usually retreat back to e7, and then we can capture the free pawn. And then of course, if they retreat back to g6, we're just going to go to d2. And that's pretty much everything you need to know to play the Alekhine-Chatard Attack. I mean, it's one of the most fun, one of the most dynamic openings in chess, and it's in the French defense of all places. Leave a like if you learned anything from this video, and also let me know if there are any particular variations you'd like me to cover while I'm covering the French. Thanks for watching.